eyes are the windows to the soul. So let's not make them soul-sucking voids. What's up, art friends? It's Perseus, and this week we're going to learn how to draw eyes. We'll cover the basics, learn about different angles, and even discuss eye shapes, from monolids to round eyes. No eye shape is safe today. I'm so excited because this is the first week to kick off our new vanilla series, which I debuted in my previous video, drawing a head from every angle. Now without further ado, let's get started. Let's start with the structure. In the simplest terms, the basic structure of the eye is a ball with an iris and pupil, essentially a hole in the eye held inside of a socket and wrapped in flesh and muscle. Gross, but accurate. The shape and definition of the eye will depend on all three of these components, which we'll cover later in the video in part 3 on eye shapes. To draw an eye, we're going to start with a sphere. Draw a cross in the middle of our sphere, and then draw the iris and the pupil on top. We'll sketch our eyelids by drawing the upper lid covering part of our iris. This is crucial, because if the eyelid isn't covering part of the iris, our character will end up looking perpetually shocked and a little scary. The lower eyelid is more forgiving in the expression department, but you'll see later that how it's drawn will really dictate our eye shape. The lower lash line will be drawn connecting one side of the sphere to the other. You'll notice that the eye shape is not perfectly symmetrical, but that the upper eyelid slopes downwards towards the inner corner and the lower eyelid of the eyes slopes upwards towards the outer corner. The inner corner of the eye will also extend farther past the sphere, as it houses the tear ducts. We'll draw our eyelid fold above the upper lash line, and then I always like to draw a suggestive line around the tear duct and lower lash line for extra emphasis, because eyes naturally have these wrinkles. When drawing in the upper eyelashes, I draw them in clumps instead of individual hairs, as it makes for fuller lash lines. This is especially useful when drawing female eyes, where we want our eyelashes to look thick and fluttery. For the lower lash line, we can just use individual hairs. And of course, we can't have a one-eyed character unless you're going for that Cyclops look. So to draw a pair of eyes on our character, we're going to draw our second eye one eyeball length away and repeat the same steps. We just need to give our eyes some suggestive shading and make our upper lash line darker than the lower lash line because it's casting a shadow onto our eyeball. Add a sleek brow over your eye, and you're pretty solid. To draw our eyes from different angles, we need to keep our sphere and center cross in mind. I don't necessarily use the center cross as the place I draw my iris and pupil, but more as a reference point for where my character is looking and as a guide to draw my lash lines. Let me show you what I mean. Let's start with our eyes looking up. With observation, you'll find that the eyeball isn't a completely perfect sphere, but that the section of the iris actually bubbles out. To draw in our eyes from the bottom up, we have to think about how visible our eyeball will be. The upper lash line will be fully drawn at its full convex shape because it's most visible from this perspective, while the curve of the lower lash line will be flatter because of the angle we're looking up at it by. The opposite can be said about eyes looking down. In a similar manner, our irises will still bubble out. However, this time the upper lash line will be flatter compared to our lower lash line, which will be fully drawn in its convex shape due to the angle we're looking at our eyes. Drawing eyes from a 3/4 view is really where our guidelines come in handy. With it, we're able to better sketch in our lash lines by remembering that the upper lash line will always slope down towards the inner corner and the lower lash line will always slope up towards the outer corner. We now just have to foreshorten the length of our eyes because of the angle we're looking at it by. But if we follow the guidelines on our sphere, it'll work itself out. Eventually. Drawing the side view is pretty easy compared to our other angles, but we just have to keep in mind again that our iris will bubble out a little past our sphere, and that because the pupil is essentially a hole in our eye, it will be disc-shaped at the angle we're viewing it. And finally, here are some examples on what I mentioned earlier about using the guidelines as a reference for where my character is looking. If the iris and pupil are directly on top of the cross-section, then I know that my character is looking straight ahead. And if the iris and pupil aren't on that cross section, then I know that they're looking in a different direction. Of course, everyone's eyes look different, so let's talk about eye shapes, shall we? Almond eyes are the most straightforward because it's the one most people associate with eyes. You'll notice that the lower lash line touches the lower edge of the iris. Monolid eyes tend to have shallower sockets and heavier, fleshier lids, which is why the lid is not very visible and even covers part of the tear duct. Round eyes tend to be larger, and the lower eyelid and lash line don't touch the bottom of the iris. Do note, however, that despite being rounder, the upper lash line still covers part of the top of the iris. When drawing downturned eyes, I make the middle line of the cross-section slope down and just draw the eyes following the same rules as drawing the almond shape, but of course keeping the slope in mind. This trick makes the eyes look sadder and sleepier. And not gonna lie, I personally love downturned eyes. The same goes with drawing upturned eyes. I just make the middle line slope up instead of down and follow the same steps. This trick makes the eyes look longer and more cat-like. To draw wide set eyes, I make the eyes farther than the standard one eye length away from each other. And then to draw close set eyes, I make the eyes closer than the standard one eye length away from each other. Finally, when drawing hooded eyes, we just want to make the eyelids smaller. Hooded eyes have fleshier eyelids. However, because they still have deeper sockets than monolided eyes, you'll notice that though the lids are smaller, they still don't fold over the tear duct in the same way that monolids do. And there you have it, friends, everything you need to know about drawing eyes. This concludes the first episode in the Vanilla series, and as always, please hit the thumbs up if you learned something, comment if you have any questions, and follow for more content like this. See you in the next video. Ciao!